Welcome, everyone. So tonight we are going to be actually talking about a very important topic in regard to the way we work with clients in any um, position that you may hold at this moment. But beyond just working with clients, what we are going to be embracing is the idea of how your presence as an individual can indeed impact the experience of the other. Um, Far beyond from your theoretical approach or your verbal approach or narrative to the other, what we are going to be focusing today is to begin understanding how your being, your presence, it's in and out itself a force that can modify, um, or can transform, or can invite the individual to create change if that's what they choose to do. So, but before I do that, um, I would like to say good evening to Mr. Sida for joining us today, and to everyone. And here is a recommendation. Some of the topics that we are going to be covered today may resonate with you or may not. The idea is that you take what is good for you and what is going to benefit you, rather than looking at it as an imposition or a method of this is how it works. It is quite the contrary. It's an invitation for you to begin learning about you and what are you doing, not only with clients, but with people that surround you, family members, friends. So it's an invitation merely to begin looking at how the dynamic between you and the rest of the world is happening at this moment. And in order to do that, oftentimes I share that in order to connect, we need to disconnect. I know that we do have a busy life and we are doing all our things at the same time. But I'm a firm believer that this idea of multitasking, it's just that, an idea. Our brain cannot multitask. So my invitation is for you to disconnect, to connect in the symposium today. And of course, if there are questions, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand, and Mr. Sita will help me to monitor the multiple pages of attendings so that we can see you raising hands. If you're not, you can just unmute yourself and share your thoughts. Okay? Beautiful. Can everyone see my screen? Beautiful. Any initial words, Mr. Sita, before I move forward?
No, I just as a reminder, we use the symposiums as a conduit, connect with our student body, to let them know who we are. They get a kind of a more a deeper sense of our values, our attitudes as professionals and counselors, and so you can kind of absorb that into your educational experience. So it's very nice to see everyone here tonight. Thank you, and of course, if you're here tonight. You don't have to write a paper, so it's one less thing you have to worry about. Just we'll give you the passphrase to enter into the assignment to confirm you were here. So thanks again for everyone for being here, and enjoy the lecture.
Thank you, Mr. Sita. So, as a way of beginning today, I would like to position ourselves into what is going to happen. So, and I like this phrase that I kind of rephrased. It was a quote that I changed a little bit, but I would like to start with it so that we begin actually positioning our mind and our being into what is going to happen in the next slices. So, merely vagueness of the clinician or you beyond their technical skills or specific interventions, meaning beyond the method, can be a powerful therapeutic agent. You, your persona, yourself, your energy, your entity, your totality, without saying a word, can be transformational for someone.
Yeah, right there, right there.
So, yeah. So yes, if we are working, let's mute the mic so we can hear each other. So position yourself and begin imagining how you, in front of other human beings, can indeed transform that one in front of you. And at times, it's difficult to think about it because we had been embedded with the idea through academics, through society, through policies, through work, through everything that you have read. We have been embedded with the idea that we must do something for the other when we are servicing other individuals, whether it's in the human service field or as a clinician, which is still part of the human service field. The idea tonight is that you don't have to do anything. You can be you in a dynamic with another human being, but there are ingredients necessary to that presence that can be very impactful to the other. So I will invite you to begin thinking how as Veronica, as Felicia, as Kaiten, as Crystal, as Casey, as Ryan, how can I can can impact the other without saying anything? And that's what we are going to embrace tonight. Your presence is good enough. Okay. So, of course, as in any other lecture that we have developed, we have goals. We are going to learn about the presence, what it means, how it looks like, what is required, what are the elements. We are going to begin actually exploring the concepts that link to this idea of a presence, specifically exploring some ideas from some philosophers and writers. I'm not going to be spending a lot of time of explaining those philosophers because truly it will take us more than just an hour and a half. But I will throw those key elements so that we begin noticing that this is not a topic that has been uncovered 2 years ago or last year. It has been in the realm of studies for so long. Interestingly enough, as clinicians, even myself, we never explore them in our preparations, in our trainings. So how important it is that we begin actually thinking about how others have offered a different way of looking at the healing process. Mhm. Also, we are going to be talking about the presence as a nonverbal manifestation. In other words, you don't have to carry out any conversations in order to manifest a change or experience the bi-directional effect of the transformational process that can be found in the clinical work. We are going to explore the idea of the clinician as the co-regulator of the experience, which is a fantastic um, topic and theme within our field. How can you, as a clinician, can be a co-regulator of the experience, not the modificator, not the changed force in the individual, but as an individual that together with the other can co-regulate the experience of the other. Um, the presence we are going to begin actually we are going to explore how we apply this, how this can take place, how my presence can indeed be trained in order to be useful, more mindful and intentional. In other words, how can I become aware of how my presence can be so powerful enough to give the other the sense of being accompanied by you whenever they are sharing the suffering with you. Beautiful. So to start with, I want to point out that this idea of a dynamic or relationship with you and the other has been actually shown by others. So Buber and Merleau-Ponty has indeed studied this before, the importance of the I-thought relationship. You and I, the relationship that exists between two has been already a topic of a conversations for so many years. In other words, how two beings meet each other as a full subject, not as an object. So, whenever we function as clinicians, there is always this idea that I'm the expert, that I'm the possessor of the information, and that I'm going to heal you. And that somehow I'm going to ask questions, and somehow I'm going to begin providing you with techniques that will make you feel better. From the standpoint of Merleau-Ponty, which it's the phenomenological standpoint, the entire focus is not about me changing you, healing you, curing you, but instead how we together in a relationship can evoke a powerful transformational force that can change yourself if that's what you want, and it can also transform me as a clinician. In other words, there is not one direction effect. We both get impacted. Hence the idea of you and I, and how our two beings can encounter each other as a subjects instead of a me considering you an object. Object not in a way of, oh my God, I'm nothing but an object. No, object more in relation to I am the one with the authority, so I'm gonna do you. That's how we consider the other an object. When I, in my position, elevate myself so much that I have the power to do whatever I want to do with you. From this standpoint of the presence, we both get transformed. The challenge is how do we transform each other?
Mhm.
That's what the challenge comes down to, because we don't know until we go into the experience. Now, through this idea of the phenomenology, or in other words, the existence itself of the presence, a way in how the clinician can relate to others or engage into a relationship or dynamic with others must be genuine, authentic, and I'm throwing already keywords that you have studied with some theories in counseling. Who utilize this idea of genuine and authenticity? Can you remember who is this author? Yes, Mr. Sida. Roger, someone said Felicia. Okay. Someone beat you, Mr. Sida. Indeed. So Roger actually borrows those beautiful concepts and begins saying, look, when we are authentic and when we offer this positive regard to the individual, something happens. I don't know what happens, but something it's indeed taking place. So from this standpoint, that my presence is an element that can indeed influence the transformational effect in both of the parties involved in a relationship, we come to understand that in order to see that transformational power, we must begin experiences and sense of visibility. In other words, the others is seeing you. You exist. What happens to you when you are not heard or you are not seen at work? Tell me, what's the experience like? Or when you are not seen or heard, you find another job. Of course, Felicia, you too. The value, don't feel appreciated. You feel rejected, indeed, disrespected, frustrated. Mhm. Um, in the beautiful Spanish literature, we'll find that many of the authors will say, if people forget about your name, that's the worst thing you can do to individuals in this planet, because you are nothing without a name. Your name is connected to everything that you are. Your parents' ideas of the name that they give you, your culture behind it, the cultural customs, belief systems of the family, your own self-identity gets diminished and completely destroyed. Imagine a client in front of you and you are not able to see the client, or the client is getting the sense that you are not paying attention, or you are not hearing him, her, or them. So the entire idea of your presence is that this presence of yours must be authentic. And we will talk about authenticity down the road, but keep that word in mind. So the clinician presence, and I will actually expand it to not only the clinician, but even your own presence in front of your parents, in front of your sisters, brothers, in front of a community, is indeed a presence that opens up to an existentialist openness. In other words, you are not merely just doing anything to the other, it's the engagement of you accompanying the other. In other words, how can you be the sister to your sister? How are you being the sister to your brother, the daughter of your mother, the student of your teachers or the professors? How can they be professors without the students? Or how are they being professors with the students? It's a it's a symbiotic relationship. It's absolutely necessary in order for us to exist. Beautiful. So, Heidegger here is one of the famous philosophers. It's a very complicated philosopher, but powerful enough. Came up with this term of Mitsein. And Mitsein, and from the German, merely translated in English as being with, emphasize the idea that our presence is company to the client or to the other. You are not there to fix, you are there to accompany the individual's experience whenever they are giving you their narrative. Okay? And more importantly, whenever they are sharing with you their suffering, whatever that suffering is. I used to have, not used to, but I once in a while I encounter beautiful colleagues that will say, I don't understand how people suffer when they can actually choose something differently. And they can choose something differently. But the idea is not that the suffering it's not as important. But there is a minuscule topic according to the individual that is interpreted in that way, or it's a huge traumatic event interpreted again by the individual that is in front of the other individual. It truly doesn't matter. What truly matters is someone sharing what is happening in their lives and how they are looking at it, which is the essential element of accompanying an individual with their suffering. So the challenging part as future clinicians or as individuals that are already working in, providing services is how you can be without pain of the other. How can I engage with other individuals and they are sharing with me um, their sexual abuse, for example, or when they encounter, you know, uh, um, people that they love passing away, or when they lost their pets. It's not about the which one is more powerful or more painful. It's about the whatever they go through. It's their very own existence, and we, as part of that relationship, we can begin asking ourselves, how do I engage with it? Or what do I want to get out of it? Or how is that impacting me when I'm in the process? Now, um, the therapeutic alliance and holding environment, I think everyone has heard about the therapeutic alliance. Is that right? What do you think about the therapeutic alliance? What is it? How do we eat it? How does it look like? How does it feel like? What is the academic terminology? What is a therapeutic alliance? You can type it or you can unmute yourselves. It's not a test, okay? It's just exploring ideas.
So to have a little discussion here, Dr. Wentz, I'll answer the question you posed. And it in Rogers' works, is developing a relationship with the precept being to facilitate an experience between the clinician and the client. And Rogers famously in his era, patients they were referred to as patients rather than clients, and he wanted to take away that stigma of coming to therapy because there's something wrong with you, rather than coming to have an experience. And he changed a lot of things, including the language, because language is important. The words we use carry a meaning and they evoke an expectation. So, just as you mentioned earlier, the three core conditions: empathy, unconditional positive regard, and uh, congruence or authenticity.
Thank you, Mr. Sida. Indeed, when we talk about therapeutic alliance, it's actually embedded with this idea of building up rapport, right? Building up trust. And that building up the trust does require authenticity on your end as a clinician. And of course, the hope is that whoever is actually working with you will offer to us the same trust. That's our hope. And that's all that we can do, right? We can do certain things in order to increase our rapport, and we can manifest our presence in order to enhance that ability to build that rapport and the trust in the working alliance with our client. Now, Donald Winnicott came up with this idea of holding environment, which very unlikely is mentioned in books, or maybe I didn't read them correctly, but truly, this idea of a holding environment is to provide the space, safety, comfort, and stability for the individual that is coming to see you and working with you. This can be translated also in the dynamic with your own family members, friends. Whenever they seek support from us, that's precisely what they are looking for, a holding environment. Of course, with our friends and family members, we don't create a therapeutic alliance because, of course, it goes against our ethics of supporting and treating our own family members, right? But there is always this holding environment they are looking for. And here is, I guess, a question. Why are we constantly looking for this holding environment? This is how human are. We are constantly striving for that holding environment. There you go. To allow other person to heal trauma. Could be. We want to connect. But we just don't want to connect in any context, right? We want an environment that truly aligns with us. And this can be an environment of safety and comfort and stability. Connects directly with this idea of I want to feel accepted. I want to be visible to the other in front of me. hmm So Felicia mentions a very important element that we often give for granted, the setting of your room, how you open yourself to be with the client when when you are behind the desk or when you are too separate from the individual. And then we enter into this gray area of what is a good proximity to be with the other in front of me. And truly, there is no specific answers to that, but more than you noticing how it feels when a client comes with you. I can tell you for sure that if you're sitting behind your desk and you're carrying out a session, that will not recreate this holding environment of safety, stability, and comfort because we begin dividing each other. We begin imposing a barrier between you and the other. But it's important that although this ideas or these terms may be simplistic in what we need to do, because we give for granted that we need to do that and we need to open ourselves, it is very important that for you to begin reflecting, is this truly happening? Is this what I'm doing? Or are there, moments in which my office is not inviting, my office doesn't feel comfortable because I have like piles and piles of documents in the floor. And then my client comes in and see those piles of documents on the floor. Very important, right? Mm-hmm. Felicia's actually mentioning 3 to 4 feet to typically close enough without compromising safety. It just depends on the context, right? And it depends on how safety is defined in a specific context. If you are working with individuals that are in high level of care, which typically is what, 3 or 4, high level of care, the measurement, I guess, in the level. Of course, individuals that are psychotics, individuals that are experiencing the attachment from reality, it may be unsafe to be close, right? But in any given moment, whenever they are, I hate to say under control, but whenever they receive the proper treatment so that they can engage with you in the process, if you sustain that distance based on the fear that they may attack you, then it's no longer them. It's you as a clinician making your presence, being present, as redundant as it may sound, being in a particular way. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep myself away from you. Although you are normalized now, I feel afraid of you. So I'm just gonna distance myself. Your presence already will indicate that distance. And let me tell you a secret. Our clients are very, very smart. They notice it. They can catch up and say, you know, I noticed this. And maybe they don't tell you, but they are always attentive. Mhm. So for Rogers, as Mr. Sina was saying, those elements of empathy, congruency, and conditional positive reward for him, those are elements that make the presence powerful enough. And we will talk about, congruence and what it means. But for him as well, being fully present and attuned to the client. And when I say fully present and attuned, this connects with our previous symposiums. Every symposium that you receive, it's foundationally and a structure in a sequence of skills. We'll learn about self-awareness. Remember that? We'll learn about who we are and the importance of where you're coming from and the open-ended questions and your self-reflecting process. And of course, exploring your biases, your belief systems. When you are aware of all that, guess what happened? Your skills to be attuned with the client manifest. We also have spoken previously. I don't know if it was last year or last semester. I can't recall many things nowadays, but we also spoke about your listening skills, your non-verbal skills, the difference between hearing and listening, the different ways of listening, the different way of looking or seeing someone. So this is what being attuned and actually being fully present means to Rogers, that you have done the work with you, and then you come and encounter the experience of the other individual with empathy, congruence, and unconditional regard for the other. Those three elements cannot be present if you don't know who you are. And we will talk about that in a minute.
I want to address a comment here
Yes.
to provide some balance to this discussion. Just because we're talking a lot about distance and space and closeness, and I think we can all kind of judge what feels comfortable for the situation. Somebody said our friends would be close, so we should be. I don't know if that was a question or a comment, but we wouldn't want to be. It wouldn't be appropriate for a clinician to be as close as maybe a friend. I wouldn't want to make physical contact with them, where I might sit very close to a friend. I don't touch my clients, especially being a male. I'm very cognizant of my distance and also making sure the other person feels comfortable in my presence without being kind of overbearing on them. And of course, some folks had mentioned different situations working with different populations, like inmates or people who might have had a violent past. In my experience, I've worked with both types of populations, and I've never had an issue because I'm not there as a prison guard or the authority. I'm there as a helper trying to provide a service for them. And in almost every case that I've ever worked with, that I can't think of one where I was disrespected or mistreated or felt threatened by individuals that were actively incarcerated. And I was, maybe doing group work with folks or seeing them individually, or people who had been released from prison and were on parole or probation. So I think a lot of times our intention has a lot to set the tone. They don't see me as this authority over them rather than somebody, especially if you maintain respect, you get respect. It's automatic.
Thank you, Mr. Sira. Indeed. Mr. Sira was touching in this idea of whenever we give something, we receive something. It's automatic. Indeed, it is a process, it's a dynamic taking place. So keep always that in mind. This idea of your presence, or what we are discussing tonight, has to do with the concept of you're good enough. But that good enough requires your training, requires your understanding of who you are, requires the understanding of what it means, particular elements for you, what it means to be authentic, what it means your belief system, what do they do with you when you believe in certain things and your client don't. So we begin actually, let me give you an example, not to get political, but what happens in the election last week. Clients came in mortified with because their belief systems and their rights were violated. Perhaps mine were different, but it's not about mine that truly matters. What matters is my ability to understand that whatever suffering they were going through, it's valid for them. So it enacted a respectful environment and certainly an environment where they felt heard, which is this idea of holding an environment for them, the holding environment. So we also have spoken previously about the nonverbal cues and nonverbal behaviors in the communication process. So truly what I want to emphasize in this is that even when we don't talk, we are present. And I don't know if it has happened to you, but oftentimes we fall unconscious and we begin showing particular facial expressions that we are not aware. Even if we want to be, which just we fall unconscious. We don't have a mirror in front of us, 24/7. But the idea is that once you begin catching into yourself of what you are doing, then you begin actually, you start being aware of what is happening in dynamic in my presence. I have wonderful clients that will sit in front of me and they start shaking their leg. And then I observe that. And I start shaking mine. And I slow down. And somehow they catch up to that and they slow down as well. One of the difficulties that we encounter nowadays with technology is precisely this one. Can you tell me how can I connect without seeing faces? How can you connect without seeing their eyes? How can you connect without seeing your faces? What is happening to you? How do I know that there is something happening with you without looking at you? But it's customary nowadays not to have the camera on. Isn't that right? I'm not complaining, okay? I'm just saying that the job becomes more difficult as we move forward because now it's almost like I want to leave behind this blank screen so you don't see me. How can I engage into the experience when I cannot see you? How can I say, oh, Looks like you are having a thought there. What's happening? What are you thinking? Nonverbal cues is also very important. This connects very interestingly enough to Bolweiss and Ainsworth work in attachment styles. So you remember attachment styles? Those study psychology, child psychology. You remember those styles? How many styles do we have? I give you one, anxious. Uh-huh.
Avoidant.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Trying to, yeah. There's also anxious avoidant too, right?
Mm-hmm. That it's a combination. But the most important part
Because
about
we already got
that,
the insecure.
uh-huh, uh-huh, about those styles, it's what the kiddo experience from the carer or the parent or the individual that is taking care of them. Whenever those kiddos observe a particular facial expression without having knowledge of what is happening, they experience something, but they have no knowledge. In other words, rationally speaking, they don't know, but they feel something. They sense something. So we connect this idea of your nonverbal presence to begin noticing what can my client be experiencing when I roll my eye, when I move my glasses like that and I look at them and I say, "Hey, what? What do you say?" Or when I smile when they are telling me the traumatic experience they have had, not congruent with what they are experiencing. Nonverbal present can be impactful to the dynamic that you are engaging in with the client. As a matter of fact, with everyone, right? So, questions about this? No? It's everyone having dinner? It's time, it's time. It's okay. So now, another important topic with your presence, which are actually the elements that we need to begin comprehending in order to understand and truly feel what the presence is about, is this idea of you as someone that can act as a co-regulator of the experience of the individual. This idea of the co means that it's not you doing them. It's mutual. It's a mutual process. In other words, when you offer this holding environment, when you offer your authenticity, your acceptance, your positive regard to the individual, when you know who you are and you recreate this environment, guess what happens? Your client begins experiencing safety, acceptance. More importantly, when we begin thinking about co-regulating, it relates to your nervous system. This is not new. Someone has already researched this for us. Have you heard about the polyvagal theory? Right? So your presence itself, along with the environment, can calm the client down. I know it sounds like magic, right? Like really? This is witchcrafting. How do we do that? It happens. It happens. Imagine when someone comes to you highly hyperarousal, having an anxious crisis, and you panic along with them. What do we recreate?
Yeah, we're echoing. We start echoing. The social animals, we tend to mirror other people's responses, even unconsciously. If I do a flutter with my eyes, with my, eyelids, you will naturally do it. If my respiration increases, you'll mirror that. So when I'm with a client that comes in off the street and they're very anxious, they're just, they're running around in traffic, I feel that. I feel them pulling me in that direction. You might feel this when you see a friend and they're excited and you guys kind of both, your excitation gets, elevated together and you're enjoying each other's company. But I will sit back in my chair, take some deep breaths, and I will watch their chest start to relax, their respiration get slower. Another thing that I might do is slow, and Dr. Wentz is doing this as he's lecturing. He's the slower and the lower you speak, the more people pay attention, the more relaxed they feel. If I'm all excited, like some of these life coaches or motivational speakers, they're trying to amp your emotional centers up, right? By getting excited, jumping up and down, because you know what it feels like to jump up and down. So just by the mere fact of you observing this, you go in that direction. We want to have people kind of in this very safe, comfortable, open space where they can relax and then start to kind of observe themselves in these situations that they might describe in therapy so they can get to a deeper space within themselves that sometimes they're not able to. So I always tell people, some people's minds are like a bad neighborhood. You don't want to go there alone after night. You want to take somebody with you. So co-regulation is like having a buddy there going into this deeper space where maybe it's difficult for you to sit for a while in your own emotions and your own memories and your own thoughts.
And thank you, Mr. Sida. I like the idea of um, uh, the mirror metaphor. In Gestalt, we call it the resonance. How I am resonating with my client? How is it that the client that is experiencing depression makes me feel when he, or they come to my office? How is it that I'm resonating? Do I go deeply into the hall with them? Or do I sustain myself in the dynamic for both of us to create the balance? So Emily actually posed a very interesting question. How do you not echo and connect at the same time? And I think it's a very interesting question because to me, echoing meaning that you're falling into the client's behavior. In other words, they are pushing you, they are pulling you in. Connecting means that you are profoundly attentive and attuned and bring it to awareness. Do you notice that the session is feeling very heavy, or I will actually manifest myself? What you have shared with me during 40 minutes, I am feeling extremely exhausted or sad. I am aware I'm giving it back with both work together. So the idea of echoing has more to do with I'm falling unconscious of what is happening and I'm just letting it happen. Like I'm going there. And why is that so important? Because we have an ethical responsibility to our clients. In other words, I don't know if this is going to sound wrong, but um, in the moment when you are servicing a client, you have no right to be the patient. That's just not how it works. So this is why you're constantly engaging in getting to know who you are, your self-awareness. You become, you work in your very own traumatic experiences. You prepare yourself. You see your therapist if you need one. You consult because we are mandated, and yes, I said it mandated, um, to continuously work on ourselves. And if you need further support, then you see your therapist, not the client. Now, the client, though, it's a beautiful mirror to begin noticing. Ooh, I'm doing it again. The client is pulling me in constantly, and I fall unconscious and I don't do anything. To me, that's echoing versus connecting. Mr. Sita, what do you think about that question?
In terms of being pulled into their space or echoing. And echo is, yeah, is a mirror reflection, right? But what we're doing is creating a connection where both parties have a role in creating the dynamic. So it might be challenging for you to connect with somebody in a different space. But as you mentioned, our mandate is to care for this individual in this space. We have set the tone. We have created an environment. We bring our presence in there that is ready and available for patients. So we're well rested, we're well groomed, we're professional. And that has a communicative effect where we're saying, come into this space, join me, instead of I'm meeting you on the street in your chaos, whatever that might be. And that in and of itself has a tremendous therapeutic effect. People say, I feel better, just being here. And that's the point. We've changed their mind state, and then, through more advanced techniques, we start teaching them how to do it themselves. So we become a model for them. We became a calm. And as you mentioned, Dr. Wentz, if you have trouble regulating yourself, you're allowed to be human as a therapist, but the training helps us prepare to be able to regulate ourselves, to not become unbalanced, even when there are very emotional topics and discussions coming up. And if you find that something is disturbing you or kind of poking at an old wound of yours, then attend to it in time, not with the client. Pay attention, make a mental note, and then go back to the client. So, and say, and I know the things that kind of bother me, they're different from everybody because they probably have a lot to do with people's just past experience. But we can resonate a tone, an energy. I mean, to kind of to broaden it, that soothes the person, and then you can work from there. It's not always possible. Sometimes you can just go where you can get. They're not, and the only times I can remember that happening is once I think a few clients, they were under the influence of a psychotropic drug or something like that that really was creating an issue there. But almost every other time, and I can connect pretty quickly, 5 minutes, first meeting the client, they get a sense of safety, acceptance, non-judgment, and we're off. Anybody have any questions about that? Or I know we're getting to a lot, and what I want to I'm so appreciative of how Dr. Wentz is breaking all this down very minutely, because I teach advanced practitioners. I supervise folks who are postgraduate studies, and we go over this stuff because they still need to work on it. Just like a professional athlete, you're always working on fundamentals. Counselors are the same way. We go back to the basics because those are the things that produce the outcomes we're looking for. This is why we teach this first, and then we build the other skills on top of these, because these foundational skills, if they're not executed properly, you can forget about the rest. It's not even gonna come, it's not even useful at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Sita. And of course, as I was mentioning, there is an ethical dimension to the presence, to your own presence. For Levina, which is another philosopher, the clinician's presence is an ethical act of bearing witness to the client's suffering. So if you really think about it, someone is sharing their suffering to you. It is about what you do with the suffering that truly matters based on the ethical responsibility that you have towards the client. This is why the idea of you being pulled into the client's experience to the point where you can no longer do anything in the session, it's a process that you will need to reflect, because then the client is not going to obtain what they are looking for. Now that you are changing them, is for you to begin realizing what happens to you, and for future reference to begin thinking how your willpower, which is another term that we utilize in the presence, is being taken away by a more powerful presence. Not to say that the client that we are debating on who has more power when we are in front of each other, but when they are overpowering you, there is no balance in the transformational process. In other words, nothing is going to happen because you are being taken away already. So it is your ethical responsibility to begin understanding what is happening to you when you're in front of that human being, especially when we do clinical work, of course. So just to make sure it's clear, we are not looking to impose solutions, or we are not looking to say to, well, there has been times where I interrupt the process. So I may do some, subtle movement or subtle noise in order to interrupt the overly bearing sense of what is happening in the dynamic. Because remember, we are also part of the dynamic. The change impact us both. They are coming to you for support. You are ethically, morally responsible for creating a benevolent environment that will support the client whenever they are sharing their pain or whatever they are going through. Okay. So, um, the presence is a mutual transformation, is what Yalom have noted. I guess everyone knows Irving Yalom, right? Maybe. Have you read about Irving Yalom? No, maybe. Well, I would recommend you to begin looking at him.
Yeah,
It's
Irv Yalom is a great psychologist or psychiatrist, I think. I think he's both, and author. And he's got a great book called, what's that book called? Um,
he is very engaged into
I
existential
forgot now.
therapies.
I forgot. Yeah, he's existentialist. He's got a number of titles, but one of the most popular ones is The Gift of Therapy. And if your aspirations are to be a therapist or a counselor, I would recommend it because it really helps kind of fill in some things the academic, you know, scholarship does not.
Mhm. Indeed. For Yalom, he will say the therapeutic process is now one direction. We all get impacted. So it is about your openness to be willing to see that transformation. What happens to you after a particular session? What happens to you after a particular amount of work with a particular client? So for him, the clinician is just not someone that sits down and observes, but both parties are engaged. Hence, this idea of creating a balance instead of someone just pulling you in. We need to create a balance between both. It's a dance, as the somatic individuals will say. We dance with the client. We just don't just, follow their steps. We allow them to start the dance, but we influence that as well. So when the dance is not being taking place, it probably means that it's about the clinician. You don't know who you are. There are traumatic experiences being reconnected again. You probably are actually doubting about you. You're burned out. Whatever is happening, and when the dance is not taking place, is perhaps the clinician. There are elements that you need to look at about you. So your presence, along with the other, it's a transformational process because it teaches you about you with that specific client. So to give an example, there was a period of time in my life where working with individuals with depressive symptomology was too much for me because somehow the universe sent me like 20 of them at the same time. And I got tired. Something was happening to me with that specific topic and theme. So, of course, it took me work to begin realizing that maybe, you know what, I was not so crazy after all. I was rejecting something. Of course, I will tell you that later on, but when you start working on yourself, when you begin reflecting, you encounter what is happening and you work on it. Mhm. So, so the clinician in their presence becomes a witness, a mirror, a co-regulator, and a fellow traveler on the client journey. Offering more than interventions, they offer the gift of their authentic and compassionate being. This is truly what your presence is about. It's cool to sit down and provide the ABCD approach, which it works too. But imagine when your presence is just an element that can, in and of itself, evoke the change in the other individual, if they choose to. Okay. Now, the next phase, any questions up to now about the presence? Remember, presence is transformational. Presence is ethical. Presence require authenticity from your part, who you are, what you feel, how you feel in a particular context. Presence comes from this idea that you are a witness of the pain of the other. The next question will be, what do you do with that pain in that moment when you're helping others? Now, how do we foster that presence? In other words, how do we make it grow, right? How do we build up a strong and solid presence? That is actually the next step in this presentation. This is nothing magical because we have talked about this before. It's just a reminder. In order to foster the presence, mindful atonement and embody awareness is a must. We need to begin understanding who we are. We need to begin understanding our feelings, our emotion, processing whatever we need to be processing. We need to engage in mindfulness practices in order to actually continue being attuned with our very own feelings and emotions. And this is an ongoing process. It's not about you going for 3 sessions of mindfulness to say, oh, I practice it. It's an ongoing process, meaning forever and ever, ever, ever until we die. So, from the phenomenological perspective, embodying the presence has to do with your ability to be in the world. That idea of being in the world comes from Merleau-Ponty. The idea of, can my view, my worldview be so ample and vast that I can allow myself to see any of the challenges that come through my office without judging them, without rejecting them? Is you and the world. How are you existing? Of course. Um, Once again, there is this idea of no duality in this mindfulness attunement that is related to the concept of, I'm not going to judge you, or I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to see your point and attempt to understand your experience. Okay. Of course, basic stuff that we know already as clinicians, mindful work, exploring your own emotions, breathing work, all that helps you to center. Okay. That is going to help you to enhance your presence. I like to use the word enhance your willpower, not as a way of empowering or overpowering others, but a way of remain at peace when the dynamic appears to be challenging. Okay. So authenticity and congruence are elements that we must have. And I keep saying this because you cannot be present with whatever you say doesn't align with whatever you're thinking and how are you feeling. That is a lack of congruency. And you will notice, if in case you are not doing it right now, if you are not working with clients right now, you will notice that whatever you feel and you think and you say don't align, there will be always this questioning of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Because you're not being truthful to you. And it's not that there is, it's invalid. I think we are all humans and we go through that process. The other day I encountered a wonderful clip on the net because of course, the internet is wonderful, of an individual telling what or sharing what winter depression is, or how is the season depression, um, and then telling us what to do. It just happens that when you begin realizing that this individual suffers of that and doesn't do anything about it, that you start noticing the incongruency. When we say to the clients what they need to do and we don't do it, Guess what happened? Your presence is weakened because you are not congruent to yourself. Your word doesn't carry power anymore. So, of course, practicing authenticity for everyone, that's required to understand how you feel in a particular with particular topics, with particular disorders. What do you think about particular populations, groups, so that we work on it, biases, so we begin exploring them, so that we clarify them and we begin diffusing them, so that whenever someone comes to us, we can help them. Even if we can, at least to say to them, you know what, this is out of my hands. I'm going to refer you out. Or even when you can't help your friends, I can't help you, my friend. But I have a couple of numbers of therapists that you can always use. Radical openness and non-judgmental. This is the duality that we were talking before. For Rogers, we don't judge them. What is positive regard, by the way? I always like this terminology. Does it mean that we need to love and accept everyone? Positive conditional regard or unconditional, I should say, not conditional.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes um clinicians have a hard time with this unconditional positive regard. So let's say, well, how can I work with somebody who's a perpetrator or some criminal or something? We're not talking about judging their life. We're not talking about um saying they can do anything they want and I'll admire this person. We're saying in the moment, in this moment, I suspend any judgment. I see you um, as you are in this moment, and you can tell me anything you want, and with the intention of to keep going with it, to not interrupt the process, so you can get to a deeper understanding of yourself. So rather than saying, we shouldn't do that, or you should think about, how that affects other people, that aborts the whole process. So we utilize this tactic of unconditional positive regard, and we suspend our ego. We suspend our persona. A persona is a Greek word that means the mask that an actor wears. So when these masks are put on, and we wear a mask to be out in the world. We call it the ego or the persona, and sometimes we have multiple masks that are layered on top of each other. We take those off, so I don't have to be the professor. My job is to challenge you. So in a professor role, I'm not a therapist. I know sometimes some of you folks have seen that side of me where I am there to challenge you. I'm there to facilitate growth and change and all the things that come with that. We harden you through the experience of study, through time management, through integrity, through ethical conduct. All those kinds of things are shaping, the kind of clinician we want you to be for a lot of good reasons. Uh, so I think it's important to recognize that when I go into the therapy room, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm not my regular persona. the therapist persona that I have cultivated that says this is okay. It's okay for someone to have these attitudes, beliefs, and feelings because they don't affect me. That's one reason if you're too close to the individual in another relationship, maybe a family member or a friend, then you can't suspend that. You have their actions affect your actions. This is why our ethical guides state that you shouldn't have a dual relationship with individual. I've had students ask me if I could be their therapist. I'm like, no, I can't, absolutely not. There's other providers you can go with, but in order for me to maintain objectivity, I've got to have, as much as there's a therapeutic alliance there's something that's called the therapeutic distance. So we're not enmeshed. We're not too close. We're close, but not involved in each other's lives, so to say.
So another way of manifesting this radical openness and non-judgment to the individual it's actually adopted from the Zen Buddhism, which is the idea of having I look at it as this way, having a tabula rasa. I don't know anything about you. I go into the dynamic, into the relationship, not prejudging. I want to know how is the depression for John. I know what the textbook says, but I want to know how is John and John's experience with depression. So from the Zen idea is go with beginner's mind. You don't know anything about it, about this individual. Ask questions. And in contemporary terms, we call this curiosity. Go with curiosity. Ask questions. And of course, we practice reflective skills, which reflect listening skills, empathic responses, and open-ended questions. All that we have explored before. I mean, you probably don't remember because I think those presentations were from spring last semester, but open-ended questions allow the narrative to manifest. Empathic response also do that. Active listening will do that. So your radical openness and non-judgmental is indeed foundationally supported by your practices, all the skills that you have learned through all this process. Those are in the counseling field, getting prepared, or the human service field. Those are topics that we all cover through our studies and our academic preparations. So you will begin noticing that all those skills are foundational for our presence. And our presence merely by being there with awareness can be a changing force for the client as well as for you. Okay. So empathic resonance and the capacity to hold the space. I like this theme because it invites us for us to hold the place for the individuals that are sharing their pain with you. And more so, that we embrace the pain with compassion. And how do we work in being compassionate towards others? Well, you have the skills already. You don't judge. You understand that if you are not congruent with yourself, the true self of yours is not going to manifest in sessions. When you discover that you have biases, that there are particular elements of your traumatic own experiences that impede or will stop the process to flow, the dance will stop and you will fall unconscious and you will be pulled into the client's experience without you having an opportunity to not do that because you are unconscious. There are work to do still with you as an individual. So, once again, this idea of resonating empathically with the client is accepting what they are sharing with you. That your values on a particular topic are put aside to give full attention to the individual. And the full attention can be manifested through slowing down, through asking questions, through being curious, to notice how you feel even in that moment. And we hold then an environment of safety. Uh, um, oh, shoot, the word just went away. Safety, comfort, and why not a validating environment that we are all looking for. And when that gets put in place, that means that you are looking at me, that you can see me. And when someone can see us, that means that I exist. And when I exist, I'm alive. And when we are alive, what do? We grow. We remain in a different dimension of quote unquote happiness, whatever that means for everyone. So very important to hold that safe space. So another very important thing that I want to touch that is part of how we make our presence to flourish is to build up your capacity of ambiguity. So, indeed, Brittany, beautiful. Oftentimes, um, understanding has different meanings to me, Brittany. Brittany is actually sharing the following. We don't always have to understand, but validating goes a long way in a relationship. Understanding in terms of I see your experience and somehow I get very close to that experience that I can feel what you're going through. To me, it's necessary. Now, if the pain, the suffering, or the challenge that you are offering to me is being given and doesn't equate to my values of what I think of the problem, they don't need to be aligned. Because remember that at the end of the day, someone is coming to get support from you. So you put aside those values. Mhm.
Yeah,
That's
this this dynamic that happens where like if Dr. Wentz and I go outside and we're looking at the sky and I say the sky is purple and he says no, it's blue. It's there's this argument that's happening where I'm challenging his perception or he's challenging my perception. And all this in relationships, this happens a lot of times too, because we're trying to validate our own experience. So we inadvertently invalidate other people's experience. And you might say, well, tell me about that. What do you mean by purple? Well, the backdrop against the mountains, the sun setting, I'll give my whatever my description is, how poetic as I can make it. And instead of him saying, no, it's this, he gets a sense of how I feel about it. What's my mood? What is my perception of that moment? And when I work with couples, and for some reason I have a lot of very difficult couples lately, they're always trying to one up each other. He did this, and no, well, she did that. And I ask, instead of trying to find out what really happened, I'll just ask something like, why is it so important for you to tell me what he did to you? So they can say, well, because I feel, terrible, and I want to share that pain or whatever they're getting to. And of course, this devolves into a pattern of interacting where people are just they're in a war of words and insults rather than trying to harmonize themselves within their relationship. And a lot of times we have to let go of that competitive nature with this other person and say, I'm not here to fight you. I'm not at a war with you. I'm here to get to travel on the same road with you in a way that's harmonious, that's supportive, that's has a quality of mutual admiration. And sometimes people have never had that kind of experience in a relationship. So just my words will have to influence how they might see themselves, because even their families have 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 created this dynamic where that's the norm.
and that's a beautiful way of looking at it, to begin understanding each other and it's still, understand that maybe for you it's blue and maybe for you it's green and it's perfectly fine. I guess my entire curiosity is, how did you come to see that green and I see a blue? I want to get closer to your view, not to challenge you, but to understand you. Mhm. Because if we enter the relationship with an open mind, an open heart, and your ability and your willingness to understand the other, then there is no challenge, which is what Mr. Sita was saying about the couples. They are constantly fighting, and sometimes they don't even give themselves the opportunity to say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, after all, it's fine that it looks blue to you. Doesn't give me trouble. Quite the contrary. I can notice the aquamarina is the same as navy blue, just a little greenish there. Right? So another important element that I want to share with you is this idea of tolerance to ambiguity, uncertainty. This comes handy when you begin developing your ability to understand that oftentimes when we are working with individuals, it doesn't need to follow a particular path. And then you need to be open to realize the client will guide you. Maybe you are sure that the next session is going to be about, what happens to the individual 30 years ago. And then suddenly the individual comes and says, I just got fired last week. You don't know what is going to happen. You remain open to that and to be at peace, understanding that every single encounter with a client may be a mysterious process that day. Or it could be a continuation of the previous session. You developing your ability to be okay with ambiguity is totally fine. I had a wonderful intern of mine, a state level intern, that told me the session ended and the client was feeling terrible and I was feeling terrible, almost like if the session is mandated for the client to feel good at the end. We don't know if the session is going to make the client feel good or not. Actually, the client can leave your office feeling fully moved. And through the week, the client may reflect and integrate the new learning. So, ambiguity. Yeah, you don't need to know everything. Yes. And you don't need to know what is going to happen if you let them actually go through the process because they didn't end it happy that session. Cool. It's cool. Ambiguity. So, the alchemy of presence is indeed an essential element in the relationship. Being fully present is not just listening to the client, but having explored yourself to your totality. What do I hate? What do I love? What do I like? How do I like it? What do I need? Who has rejected me? How do I feel with rejection? What are my biases? Which individuals I hate? Which disorders I don't like to work with? All that, when we begin exploring, is valid. And as I always mention, it's an ongoing process. Even, for Mr. Sita and I, they have been in the field for so many years. We still go through these simple questions and reflecting processes. We consult each other. What do you think about this? Because it's an ongoing process constantly. It never stops. Never, ever. I have a therapist. You guys have a therapist? It's an ongoing process. We are constantly growing and developing and enhancing our self-concept. There is always work to do. So remember then that in order to enhance your presence, openness, non-judgment, mindfulness practice is a must. Reflecting on your own self will give you that energy in your presence. Understanding that the ambiguity of the individuals can move you, but it is part of the process, will indeed create foundational pillars for your presence. So the question that I want to leave everyone with is the following. Do you believe that your presence is good enough? You don't have to answer tonight. You can keep it uh, as an assignment of your own reflecting process. Thank you. And the passphrase will be gobble, gobble, gobble. It's on the chat. Um, so you can put it in the assignment in Canvas. Beautiful. So before we end it for today, any questions, any comments?
I just wanted to say that you guys together make a really great team, and both of these symposiums have given me so much information, and I really appreciate all the efforts you put into making them so interactive, but also so understanding.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We do. And we love lecturing. It's the highlight of our, semester because, traditionally I used to lecture 3 days a week and now everything's online. And that's great because we can reach more people, but that kind of old way of doing things and connecting, this provides us that space and we really do appreciate it. So Thank you for saying that. Thank you guys for being here.
So I tell you what, why don't you go and have dinner, spend time with your loved ones, with your pets, enjoy life, and we'll see you then next semester for our symposiums. Will that be okay? And if you have questions, we are an email away. Shoot us an email and we will get there. And of course, we will process the recording and share the link so you can check out the slides there or some of the comments that we have made throughout this presentation. Okay? Beautiful, everyone. Have a wonderful night.